When he goes up and over the top, it will race away for 4.
Well-deserved double century for Justin Greaves.
West Indies didn't just save a test match, they produced one of the greatest fourth innings efforts in the history of cricket. I want to break that down exactly what happened in Christchurch and how historic that moment is. But we have to always come here and say, being a West Indies fan is tough, right? We struggle most of the times in the last 30 years. So every now and again, when you get a performance that lifts the hearts, lifts the spirit of the great Caribbean nation, you have to talk about it, but you also hope that it pushes the team forward and they'll capitalize on it. It hasn't always happened. We saw a resolute performance recently in India. We go back a couple of years back to that great night at the Gabba where Kemar Roach destroyed a great Australian team. And you look for these moments to push the team forward, and you don't always get them. And we think about it in different ways. But this was a record-breaking performance. We got to look at the numbers. West Indies, 457 for 6. That's the highest fourth innings total ever in a 5-day test match. The only other time that someone went higher was in 1939 in that timeless test match. We no longer have those. So this is a monumental performance. They survive 163.3 overs. That's the longest fourth innings ever in 95 years. I'm telling you, when I was watching this, I had no idea that they could pull this off. I thought that we would have been feckless, we would have just rolled over, and it didn't happen. And we'll get to Shea Hope in a second because first innings performance was great. Second innings, even greater. But we have to start with the man of the hour, and that's Justin Greaves. That's a masterclass. He delivered a legendary performance, 202 not out of 388 balls. And he faced more balls than his entire test career combined. You got to think about that. In this one inning, the guy stood up, delivered one of the great performances you've ever seen. And by doing so, Greaves becomes the 7th man with a fourth innings double century, the first number 6 to ever do it, the 4th West Indian. Those are big performances. And here's an interesting moment, and one of the stats that when I was watching the game, because I stayed up for it, and it was the fact that in the final session, he only hit 2 boundaries. And that tells you everything about what it meant to save the test match. The discipline. Maybe if Hope didn't get out, perhaps they would have stayed a little bit longer, could have done something special, maybe pull off a historic run chase, beating the performance they did many years back against Australia. But no one thought 500 and change is something that any test side could chase down. And so you have to think about that discipline. And when you think about that discipline, you have to think about that great wall, that performance from Kemar Roach. The man which some of us thought was just discarded, never quite understood why. When you think about the West Indies bowling attack, you always thought there's a place for Kemar Roach, even if it's not always bowling, but for his leadership. And we hadn't seen him for a little bit. And injuries to the likes of a Kemar Joseph, to Alzari, he gets back into the team. The guy delivers a fifer at his age. It's crazy bowling. And you would think that alone would have been special. But the guy stood there and he played the innings of his life. 58 not out from 233 balls. The most balls ever faced by a number 8 in the 4th innings of a test match. So that is something special. And I remember there was a moment when he passed his half century, he was just not scoring for how long? It took 5 runs off his last 104 balls. That is what I think is elite concentration. So you match that with the discipline from Greaves, I would have to say discipline too from Roach, but that type of concentration. And so that partnership was an outstanding one. Together, Greaves, Roach put on 180 for the 7th wicket. It's now new highest fourth innings partnership you've seen for the 7th wicket, breaking a record that stood for 35 years. So Roach should have been 2 when that record was established many years ago. And I want to get back now to Shea Hope. Hope for me, I like what you've seen. We know he's a super talented batsman. Broke on the scene, those double centuries there all the way back in England. He never quite delivered the kind of test setup. In ODI cricket, he's outstanding, one of the world's best. And he took some time away from the game after that slump in test match cricket, and he's back. And I think it's a deliberate move. Many people are talking about it. He didn't want to rush and come back. And we saw a century recently, another century. The guy is looking like that kind of world-class player across all formats. And long may that continue. 140 is nothing more than spectacular, right? And he made sure that the West Indies were in it for a long time. And only the 3rd time ever you had 2 batters going over 140 in a 4th innings. So it's really, really a stellar performance there. It would be remiss of me not to highlight one of the interesting things about this test match, right? New Zealand lost a couple of their frontline bowlers, Henry, Smith. Those guys weren't able to help to bowl the West Indies out. And so the likes of a Jacob Duffy had to bowl 43 overs. That's the most ever we've seen from a seamer in the 4th innings since Glenn McGrath did it all the way back in 1999. And so New Zealand bowled really long, and a lot of people who weren't slated to bowl, they had to play their part, bowl over 981 balls. That's huge, huge, huge kind of a bowling performance. So maybe it would have been a different story if the frontline bowlers hadn't got injured. But this is test match cricket. This is how it works. But this is not to denigrate the West Indies' performance, just a kind of side note that was also a thing there. But it was an historic moment. It was an epic draw. It wasn't just a draw, though. I thought about it as a historic survival story. It was epic. It was something that world cricket likes to see, something that I think the region needed, the team themselves needed. Darren Sammy as a coach, we've questioned different times in recent months. So they all needed that. And it looked like a professional setup. It was an away performance as well. So you put all of those ticks on the check mark of progress. They delivered. And so Greaves wrote his name into the history books. Roach produced an all-time defensive knock. And the West Indies showed a level of resilience we haven't seen in years. My only hope, as I'm sure all of you in the cricketing world, regardless of where you are from, is that they take this performance and they build on it. The next test match is coming up. You want to see them build on this. We want to see other guys chipping in as well. Can they draw some inspiration? Shanda Paul looked good in the 1st innings, like Hope. Then most of the guys scuttled out. We hope for the likes of Alec Athanaze to really find form, because he is a talented batsman. And you want these things to happen. And if you can get 6-7 guys performing at an elite level or beyond that level, a couple world-class performances in a test match, then you can start to think about winning some of these games and building. And you hope that the guys who are on the injury list right now will come off of that in due time, and West Indies cricket can start to move again. But I'm realistic. We come here every often and we talk about these things, and we have to talk about the good times, but it's always a long stretch of bad times with a little bit of good here, and we hope this is a building performance. I hope you liked it. I hope you watched it. There's a lot of great cricket going on. The Ashes, spectacular as well. But I hope the Caribbean region can savor this moment. And let me know your thoughts on this. And do you name an unchanged team for the next test match? Put your thoughts in the comments and we'll be back again. Thanks for watching.